At my sister's graduation, my parents announced they were disowning me. But they started shouting when I revealed their secret. My name is Celine, and at my sister's Harvard graduation, my parents stood in front of everyone and publicly disowned me. No warning, no explanation, just a smile for her and silence for me. They left my name off the invitations, off the program, out of the family. But what they didn't know was that I had already discovered their secrets, stolen inheritance, forged documents, a house sold behind my back. And in the end, it wasn't them who exposed me, I exposed them. Before diving into the story, where are you listening from and what time is it for you right now? Leave a comment below. I read them all. I arrived early, not because I was excited, just because I wanted to see if they had done it, if they truly had the audacity to make it official. The sun was already striking Harvard Yard, all proud and golden, as if it were congratulating everyone except me. Students in caps and gowns buzzed like bees around the campus gates. Parents clutched roses, gift bags, glossy programs. I held nothing, just my breath when I spotted my parents near the reserved seats. I slowed my steps. My mother Astria wore a pale blue suit and her usual hard smile. My father Everett had his blazer folded over his arm, one hand on his phone, one foot tapping the grass impatiently. Callista stood between them, glowing in her gown, sash, and layered honor cords, the perfect Harvard poster child. They didn't notice me at first. When they did, my mother's eyes scanned me like I was someone she vaguely recognized from her tennis club. "Oh, Celine," she said flatly. "You came." "I received the invitation," I replied, ignoring the sharpness in her voice. She gave a dry laugh. "You must have seen a forwarded version." I wasn't sure the RSVP list would reach that far. My father said nothing, just checked his watch. Callista opened her arms for a quick hug, and I leaned in out of habit. "You look amazing," I said. "Thanks," she replied, her voice soft, almost apologetic. "I'm glad you're here." But her eyes flicked sideways, watching our mother, always calculating how much warmth she was allowed to show. I checked the seating chart posted on the wooden easel next to the entry arch, Caldwell family. It read in bold letters beneath, Everett, Astria, Callista Blair, plus 2 guests. I looked for my name. It wasn't there. Someone handed me a plain white badge. No family crest. No ribbon. Just the word guest in Times New Roman. I stared at that badge for a long time. I had helped my mother design the original crest 20 years ago. We had spent a week at the print shop. I should have left. That would have been the dignified thing to do. But instead, I pinned the badge to my blazer and walked toward the seating tent like a ghost attending her own funeral. The ceremony started promptly at 11 o'clock. Several speakers came and went, professors, deans, commissioners. I sat alone in the far left section beside an elderly man who was asleep and a small girl scribbling on her program. Then Everett stood and walked to the microphone. He adjusted his tie, cleared his throat, and smiled like a senator about to introduce a bill. "Today," he began, "we celebrate the brilliance and dedication of our eldest daughter, Callista. Her journey has been nothing short of extraordinary." Polite applause. Cameras clicked. Callista looked down modestly. But he continued, "This day also marks a turning point for our family, a necessary shift in energy, values, and focus." My stomach dropped. "We have made a difficult decision. From this day forward, we will no longer extend ourselves to those who do not align with the integrity and vision we uphold. This includes our younger daughter, Celine." Silence. Not a gasp, not a protest. Just a ripple of uncomfortable coughs and rustling fabric. I didn't stand. I didn't cry. I sat there with my hands on my knees, suddenly acutely aware of every nerve ending in my body. My ears rang. I stared at the edge of the stage. Callista said nothing. Someone in the row behind me whispered, "Did he just say?" Another voice, "Who does that at a graduation?" I swallowed, turned my face slightly away from the stage, and forced my jaw to stay still. The speech went on, something about investments, future roots, and weeds. I could no longer follow the words. Eventually, I stood up and quietly left the tent. Not rushed, not shocked, just methodical, as if it had happened before. Later, at the reception, I tried to find my seat. There was a table labeled Caldwell and Guests. I approached it, scanning the name cards. Nothing. Callista's name was there. So was our Aunt Miriam's. Even her college roommate had a card. But not mine. A girl I hadn't seen since high school looked up from the next table and blinked. "Oh, hi. I didn't think you'd come. Your mom told everyone it was a closed family celebration. Said something about keeping the focus clear." She smiled awkwardly, as if maybe that didn't sound quite so cruel. On the table, there was a folded ivory card. I opened it. It read, "Congratulations to our only daughter, Callista. With all our love, Mom and Dad." That was the moment. Something inside me clicked. It didn't break, didn't shatter, just shifted. A woman in a floral dress walked by, glanced at me, and said, "You must be with the catering team. You're not wearing the family pin." I looked at my badge. Guest. No name. No title. In my head, I heard myself say, not even a name tag. Just a ghost badge. That's what I am to them now. So I smiled. Said nothing. Took a glass of Prosecco from a tray and began walking toward the back exit of the tent. I didn't go straight home after the reception. I walked past the cafes bustling with graduation lunches, past families laughing on the sidewalk, past a little girl holding a balloon that said, "Harvard Strong." It wasn't until the sun sank behind the red brick horizon that I finally boarded the train and let the city carry me back to my small apartment in Somerville. I climbed the stairs slowly, took off my shoes by the door, and stood still for a moment. The silence in my place was familiar, like a worn-out sweater I never had the heart to throw away. I tossed the graduation program onto the kitchen counter, but it didn't land as expected. Its pages fluttered open, and my eyes fell on a photo from the ceremony, my parents with Callista, all three smiling. The caption read, "A proud moment for the Caldwell family." No trace of me. Later that night, I sat cross-legged on the living room rug, an old yearbook spread across my lap. It was from Callista's high school graduation, 10 years ago. My mother had once told me not to bother showing up that day either. "It's not your moment," she had said. The family tribute page caught my eye, one of those custom announcements people buy for the back of the book. "To the daughter who never gave up, we are so proud of you, Callista." A single photo, my parents and Callista standing on the front porch in spring. I remembered that photo. I had been in it too. I had stood right beside her in that exact spot, wearing a dress Mom had picked. I remembered because she yelled at me for having a wrinkle at the waist. But in this version, I was gone, cropped cleanly. I touched the edge of the page and stared until my vision blurred. They didn't forget me. They erased me. The next morning, I woke up with sunlight and a stiff neck. I had fallen asleep on the floor, curled up with a pillow and that yearbook beside me like some kind of haunted journal. I got up and got ready for work at the nonprofit where I managed donor relations. No one mentioned what had happened. Of course they didn't. Why would they? The Caldwells had always kept their image polished. And I never really talked about them, not truly. Around 10, as I poured my second cup of coffee, one of the junior analysts, Rachel, strolled in casually and said, "Hey, I saw some pictures on social media last night. Your sister's graduation looked amazing. That red dress, stunning." I turned, steadying my hand so I wouldn't spill the cup. "She always looks the part," I replied, then added with a small smile, "I was there. Just, in the shadows, as always." Rachel didn't catch the edge in my voice. She laughed, "You're mysterious like that." Mysterious. That's one word for it. I headed back to my desk, passing a coworker who once played golf with my father. He nodded politely but didn't ask how I was. Another woman I used to babysit for looked away as I passed, pretending to dig through her purse. They weren't being cruel, just choosing not to see. I sat down. I opened my inbox and stared at the screen while my reflection floated faintly in the glass. What kind of family invites you only to publicly disown you? That line echoed in my head like the lyrics of a song I couldn't stop humming. Worse, what kind of daughter keeps showing up, hoping it might be different? I hated how badly I wanted them to change their minds, how tightly I had clung to the idea that maybe, just maybe, they were still my family. I looked at the stack of papers in my drawer, old birthday cards addressed to our daughters, family newsletters where my name was crammed into a corner like a footnote. One year, they sent a holiday card to donors that featured only a picture of Callista. They said it was a branding choice. It was never just one moment. It was thousands of moments, tiny cuts I had ignored until now. Because last night, when I picked up my purse and slipped out the back of the reception tent, I didn't leave empty-handed. I took the envelope, the ivory one with gold foil lettering and the handwritten message inside, to our only daughter, Callista. I slipped it into my purse without blinking. Because ghosts don't knock things over. They just take them unnoticed. And once I got home, I placed it in a shoebox under my bed next to a growing collection of objects I was never meant to keep. That night, I didn't cry. I stayed quiet. And then, I began to dig. The rain started just after midnight, soft at first, gently tapping the kitchen window like someone too polite to knock. I sat there with a blanket over my shoulders and my laptop open in front of me, casting a pale blue light across the room. I hadn't moved in hours. I had decided to stop crying, and so I didn't. I clicked through folders I hadn't opened in years. There was still a shared drive linked to my personal email, leftover from when I used to do part-time accounting for the family foundation. They had never revoked my access. I was the one who had set it up. Typical of them, really. They liked to erase people with words, not with technology. I skimmed documents aimlessly at first, old tax files, donation receipts, board meeting notes. But then something caught in my brain. A folder labeled, Holdings Updated. Inside, a PDF file, Transfer Authorization, Seaside Property Final. I clicked, and there it was, my name. My full legal name, written above a signature that looked almost like mine, but not quite. The S was flatter, the loop in the L, too wide. It was a poor copy, and it had been notarized. I stared at the name of the notary public in the margin, Savannah Caldwell. My cousin, of course. I pulled a file from my drawer, an old lease agreement with my real signature, and compared the two side by side. They didn't match. Not even close. It hit me then, what they had done wasn't just betrayal, it was criminal. They hadn't just excluded me from a speech. They had forged my signature to strip me of ownership of the one thing Dad had left me in his will, a share of the beach house in Cape Elizabeth. The place where I helped repaint the porch railings during college. The place where they let Callista host her 30th birthday with a few close friends, that turned into a bonfire party for 50 people. I closed the laptop slowly, as if sealing a coffin. I couldn't sleep after that. Around 3, I picked up the phone and called the only person in my family who had ever treated me like I had a voice, Aunt Mavis. There was a pause, then her familiar raspy voice, Seelan, honey, are you okay? Not really. My voice cracked with the words. I found a property transfer with my name. But it's not my signature. Another long silence. Oh, Seelan, she whispered. You saw it, didn't you? I asked. I didn't know what to do, she admitted. Your mother told me it was just paperwork. That they were cleaning up the books for tax season. I leaned against the kitchen wall, sliding down to the floor. You knew they were taking my name off the deed. I thought maybe it was a mistake or something. That they'd tell you later. I'm sorry. I should have said something. Her voice trembled, guilt surfacing from somewhere old. You know how your mother gets. And your father, he just follows. That sentence hung in the air like smoke. You know how your mother gets, as if she were a storm you couldn't stop, only brace for. I'm tired of making excuses for them, Aunt Mavis. I know, sweetheart. Her voice cracked again. I know. We sat in silence for a while, just breathing, just listening to the rain. By dawn, the edges of my resolve had hardened. I made coffee and sat at the dining table with legal pads, highlighters, and the old laptop I hadn't touched in months. This wasn't just about a house. It wasn't about being cropped out of a picture. It was the pattern, the way that every time something mattered, something real, they found a way to uninvite me. From the yearbook announcement. From family vacations. From the house I had painted myself. But now, they were going to remember exactly who I was. Not because I asked for a seat at their table again, but because I'd be the one flipping the table over. By mid-morning, the clouds outside had begun to thin, but the heaviness in my chest only deepened. I hadn't slept, just worked through the night, cross-referencing, verifying deed numbers, combing through local property records like a woman possessed. A soft hum from my space heater filled the silence as I stared at the screen, my coffee cold beside me. There it was. Bar Harbor. Parcel ID 00170426. The family vacation house. The cedar one from Texas, with the rocking chairs on the porch. The one my grandmother had left to the Caldwell Family Trust. It had been sold. Harlow Holdings LLC. I clicked on the name. Harlow Holdings. They hadn't even tried to hide it. The registered agent was a corporate attorney based in Boston, the same one Callista had posted about on LinkedIn 6 weeks ago. They hadn't transferred it. They sold it. Without telling me. Without telling anyone. No press release. No family email. No dinner table conversation. No. Just a quiet surgical removal, as if I weren't a beneficiary at all. As if I hadn't spent summers there painting shutters, sanding the railing, rinsing ocean salt off my knees while Dad grilled salmon on the back deck. But now it was funding Callista's boutique firm. The slogan on her website even read, "Delegated-minded investments inspired by family values." My grandmother would have been horrified. I closed the browser. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was violation. That's the word. This was no longer pain, it was something sharper. Colder. I needed air. I threw on a coat and walked to the bookstore 3 blocks away, hoping the rhythm of movement might slow my thoughts. I wasn't there to buy, just to think, without staring at a glowing screen. But fate had other plans. Just as I rounded the corner of the self-help aisle, I heard her voice. "Seelan?" I turned. Mrs. Henderson. An old friend of my mother's, known for her potlucks and her passive aggression. She was holding a book titled Aging Gracefully Through Faith. She smiled as if she didn't know her teeth were knives. "Dear, I heard Callista is doing so well. Your mother says she's expanding into luxury real estate. Isn't that just wonderful?" I forced a polite nod. Curious. I thought that house was still ours. The change in her expression was microscopic, a flicker of recognition. The kind people have when they realize they've said too much. "Oh, I mean, I don't know all the details. You know how parents are, always making moves without their kids." I looked her straight in the eyes. "Did they tell you they sold it?" She didn't answer. Just smiled again, that same smile I'd seen at every holiday dinner. The one that said, "Don't make a scene, dear." I left the store without another word. By the time I got home, my phone buzzed with a text message from an old college roommate, someone who had no idea what was going on. "Heard your parents sold the summer house. Callista is killing it. Jealous of her life right now." Jealous. That word sat on my tongue like vinegar. People envied her because they didn't know the cost of her shine, the silence of everyone she stepped on to get it. This wasn't just about business. It was abandonment in 1,000 silent, well-dressed forms. It was family photos you've been digitally erased from. A legacy where your name echoes nowhere. So I did the only thing that made sense. I changed clothes. Printed the deed documents. Packed my bag. Because some answers aren't found online. Some are hidden behind frosted office doors and receptionist smiles. And I knew exactly where to start. I parked across the street from my mother's office and stared at the tinted windows of the Caldwell Foundation. As if they were eyes watching me. The last time I was here, I was 16 years old and holding a printed version of my scholarship essay. Mom told me to walk in quietly, not to embarrass her in front of the board. I remembered the dress I wore, navy blue, too tight in the shoulders because we couldn't afford another one. She said that if I smiled and stayed still, maybe they would consider me for the summer program. I stayed still. I smiled. They picked Callista's friend instead. Now, nearly 15 years later, I wasn't here to impress anyone. I walked in without knocking. The receptionist, new, maybe an intern, gave me a polite but hesitant smile, the kind reserved for people who might cause a scene. She asked if I had an appointment. I didn't bother to answer. My heels struck the hallway floor firmly. Astria Caldwell didn't flinch when I entered her office. She looked up from her screen, not surprised at all. "So, Seelan," she said softly, as if we just had breakfast the day before. "I'd like a few minutes." She gestured toward the leather chair across from her desk. I remained standing. Her office hadn't changed. The same white orchids. The same award plaques. The same framed headline, Mother. Philanthropist. Visionary. All perfectly arranged. I half expected her to straighten the frame before we spoke. "I'm sorry you felt hurt," she began, hands clasped. "But we did what was best for the family's image." There it was, the apology that wasn't. "You don't regret the decision," I answered, voice steady. "You regret how it looked." She exhaled softly through her nose, as if I were being dramatic. "You're still welcome at events. Just as a guest. Not as the face of the Caldwell legacy. I hope you understand, it's a matter of simplicity." I tilted my head. "You mean control." Her lips tightened. "We can't have every branch growing in a different direction. People notice." "I hope they do," I said. "Because I'm not going to bend again just to fit into your narrative." She didn't reply. She didn't need to. I already knew where I stood, always behind Callista, in front of a camera, beside Dad when it made sense. That afternoon, I attended the gala I had RSVP'd for 6 months earlier. Before the disowning. Before the erasure. When I still believed I had a place in their world. I wore a simple black dress, nothing flashy, but the name tag pinned to my coat read, Seelan R. Not Caldwell. Not family. The ballroom buzzed with well-dressed donors and alumni. I stayed at the edges, scanning faces. I didn't expect warmth, but I wasn't prepared for how invisible I had become. Small talk floated around me like perfume. Midway through dinner, a waiter passed around champagne. My father raised his glass. "To our only daughter, Callista, whose brilliance continues to guide this family forward." I froze. Some heads turned toward me, then quickly looked away. My hand tightened around the stem of my glass. Even Callista blinked, clearly uneasy, but she didn't correct him. She just smiled and clinked her glass with the nearest donor. It didn't matter if she agreed. Silence served her just as well. I didn't raise my glass. I didn't speak. But something broke deep inside, clean and final. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a polished, gift-wrapped exile. I left quietly before dessert. No one stopped me. No one even noticed. I walked 2 blocks before calling a rideshare. As I sat in the back seat, the city lights blurred past. I replayed every word. Every glance. The gentle scolding from my mother. The toast from my father. The way Callista stood close enough to be admired, far enough to stay clean. And I knew, I wasn't going to wait for an apology. Or an explanation. They had built their legacy without me. Now it was my turn. I didn't waste time sleeping. As soon as the sun slipped through the slats of my blinds, I was already at the kitchen island, my laptop screen blinking with legal documents, financial records, and a half-empty mug of coffee sweating onto a coaster. Everything I needed was there. Not emotionally, but legally. I had spent the night reviewing contracts I was never meant to see, thanks to a shared cloud folder they forgot to revoke access to. I cross-referenced email threads. Compared signatures. Pulled metadata from PDFs. The trail wasn't obvious, but it was there. A real estate transaction that rerouted an inheritance trust. A payout quietly diverted around me. A marketing memo listing the family image with only Callista's name and face. I slid the printed files into a dark burgundy velvet envelope trimmed in gold. My mother had given it to me once when I was 12, filled with stationery and sealed with a note, "Always write with grace." Now, it would carry my first real reply. By 10 o'clock, I was standing in front of my parents' longtime attorney, Warren Bell. The last time I'd seen him was at my grandmother's funeral. He greeted me like someone unsure whether to hug or call security. "I need 2 minutes," I said flatly. Warren took the envelope carefully. I could see him scanning the typed, not handwritten, label before looking up. "I'll have to review it. There's a notarized affidavit, a trust challenge, and a digital link with voice recordings. The instructions are inside." "This comes with expectations?" he asked. "No," I said. "It comes with consequences." I didn't wait for a reply. Back in the elevator, my reflection stared back at me in the chrome. I looked like someone who hadn't slept, but I felt more awake than I had in years. The voice recordings had taken months to collect. Quiet, patient moments, boardroom hallways, car rides, awkward donor meetings. They never thought I'd keep listening. They assumed they had worn me down. Erased me by erosion. One recording played again in my mind, clear as daylight. "Mom, at a pre-meeting charity lunch. We only use Callista's face. Seelan doesn't fit the image we're selling." Then Dad, laughing. "She used to read everything." Well, she still did. Back home, I finally sat down, not at the table, but on the floor. I stared at the old family photo still framed near my bookshelf. It was from before Callista's high school graduation. Before the edits. I had saved it, knowing one day they'd pretend I never existed. It felt strange not to feel rage. Not right now. Not because I had forgiven them, but because I had made my move. I didn't send the envelope with malice. I sent it like one sends a receipt. Just proof of transaction. Proof that I existed. That I saw what they did. That I knew. I called my lawyer that night. "I don't want revenge," I said. "But I won't let them use my silence as consent. If they're going to erase me, I want the record to show who held the pen." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Then it starts now." The next morning, I opened my laptop to check the news, just out of habit. But before I even had the chance to send anything, my inbox was already blowing up. I hadn't even made coffee when the messages started coming in. 4 missed calls. 2 from blocked numbers. 1 from a reporter in DC. I ignored them all. Instead, I tapped the screen and opened my browser. Front page. There it was, splashed across the main page of a national nonprofit watchdog site. Luxury charity, anonymous sources question integrity at the Caldwell Foundation. My throat tightened before I even read the subtitle. It was real. The article didn't name me. It didn't have to. It referenced board documents, internal memos, and direct quotes from emails I knew intimately, because I had printed them. Read them. Cried over them. The public didn't know I was the one who found them. But the foundation certainly would. They had always prided themselves on controlling their own narrative. Now, the story had slipped through their fingers, and for once, I wasn't the one being excluded. The story spread fast. By lunch, donors were making quiet exits. 2 gala events were postponed indefinitely. The comments flooded in. Peak nepotism. Where did the money go? This is what happens when you erase people for optics. And still, I hadn't said a word. I scrolled down to a section titled Silence Stakeholders and saw a screenshot of an email chain from 3 years ago. My name wasn't in the message, but it referred to the younger Caldwell and her unnecessary complications during board decision reviews. I could almost hear my mother's tone between the lines. Then came the most shocking part. Someone had leaked the audio. No, it wasn't the full library of recordings I had sent to our lawyer, just one. The one where Astria, in a room full of donors, said, "We only use Callista's face in marketing." The other one doesn't photograph well with our narrative. followed by my father's voice. We need to be careful with what Selena finds. She used to read everything. The internet did what it always does. It dissected every syllable. And for once, I didn't feel ashamed. I felt seen. That afternoon, I left the apartment to clear my mind. At the corner store, the cashier gave me a polite smile but said nothing. On my way home, I passed a bus stop where someone was scrolling through the article on their phone. I didn't stay. When I got back, there was an email waiting, from a PR firm I recognized from the Foundation's press kits. Hi. We're preparing a unifying statement and would love to include a quote from you. Your voice matters. No subject line. No personal greeting. Just a hollow attempt to pull me back in for optics. I didn't respond. That night, while half the family scrambled for damage control, Astria announced a family unity lunch at her favorite club in Beacon Hill. From what I heard, 2 board members showed up out of obligation. Callista never came. I could almost hear my mother's voice cracking beneath the forced grace. We're focusing on healing and moving forward. We're losing control and need to patch the ship before it sinks. But it was too late. Donors were asking questions, about Bar Harbor, about the trust, about the forged signature. They weren't angry. They were tired. At 10 p.m., I refreshed the news site again. A new photo had been added to the article, my mother leaving the Foundation building, her tailored blazer perfectly pressed. But her signature accessory, the golden graduation pin she always wore, was missing. That tiny shining symbol I once would have given anything to earn. Now I sat alone in my apartment, legs crossed on the couch, laptop on my knees. The shadows were long. The air was still. And for the first time in years, I felt light. I didn't have their pin. I had something better, the truth. The courtroom wasn't grand. No carved wood paneling. No dramatic lighting like in the movies. Just rows of tired benches, fluorescent hum, and the dry scent of old carpet. But to me, this room might as well have been a coliseum. Philip adjusted his tie beside me, tapping the edge of the folder on the table in front of us. My mother sat with her arms crossed, expression unreadable. My father stared at the floor. Callista scrolled through her phone like it was a dentist appointment. The judge, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and an unyielding tone, called the hearing to order. I had filed the petition quietly 2 weeks earlier, fully knowing they'd think it was a bluff, a scare tactic. They were wrong. Philip stood. Your Honor, we request that Exhibits A through E be entered into the hearing record. No one objected. He continued, voice steady. Included in these exhibits are the financial records concerning the Bar Harbor property, notarized evidence of signature fraud, and relevant recordings concerning exclusionary behavior related to decisions regarding the Caldwell Foundation Trust. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. But it wasn't until the evidence of Grandma Elisa's will that the silence broke. The court will note, Philip said, placing a certified copy on the judge's bench, this version predates the one currently in use. It names Seelan Caldwell as the primary beneficiary of the Bar Harbor property and any future inheritance from the Caldwell Trust. Callista's hand froze mid-scroll. My mother's head whipped toward me. My father's voice came out thin and shaky. That version was never meant to be. The judge raised a hand. It was notarized and duly witnessed. Philip didn't miss a beat. Yes, ma'am. By the same legal team that handled the original estate division. They were replaced shortly after this document was filed. Everett tried again. But we never intended for that to be final. The judge cut him off. Intentions are not law, Mr. Caldwell. Documents are. Callista leaned toward our mother, whispering furiously. My mother didn't respond. Her face had gone stiff, but there was a flash in her eye. Panic, maybe. Or worse, recognition. She had known this moment might come. I didn't look at her. I looked straight ahead. Philip continued, playing the recording of the donor prep meeting. We only use Callista's face in marketing. The other one doesn't photograph well with our narrative. My mother's voice echoed through the speakers. Then my father's. We need to be careful with what Selena finds. She used to read everything. The courtroom was so quiet, I could hear someone drop a pen 2 rows behind me. Astria stood up suddenly, nearly hissing. Ungrateful girl. You waited all this time just to destroy us? I stood as well, my voice calm. I waited so I wouldn't destroy myself in the process. No one moved for 5 full seconds. Then the judge cleared her throat and delivered her ruling. The Bar Harbor property shall be returned to Miss Seelan Caldwell. Distributions from the Caldwell Trust shall be frozen pending further audit. In light of the evidence presented, the Foundation's tax filings are hereby referred to the State Attorney General for review. Callista shot toward the door without saying a word. My father remained in his seat, pale, silent. My mother tried to recover her composure, but her face betrayed her. The woman who had built a world on perception had just watched it unravel in the public record. Philip sat back down beside me and whispered, "Are you okay?" I didn't respond right away. Instead, I looked at the lapel of my coat. The pin I once wanted. The one my mother always wore to those galas. It wasn't there. But I didn't need it. The judge's final words still echoed in my ears. Miss Caldwell, the rightful heir. They kept the pin. I kept the name. 6 months later, I stood barefoot in the center of a sunlit room that didn't exist the last time my parents spoke my name. It was a modest space, renovated from what used to be an old municipal library just outside Providence. I had helped fund its transformation into a literacy and art center for teens in foster care, young people who, like me, once felt invisible in rooms where their presence was ignored or erased. The event that day wasn't grand. No red carpets. No flashes. Just mismatched folding chairs, a table of cupcakes, and kids flipping through sketchbooks they'd filled themselves. But it was mine, every part of it. And more importantly, it was theirs too. The plaque mounted at the entrance was one of the few things I insisted on keeping formal. It read, "In memory of Elise Caldwell. For the granddaughters who were erased, and those who refused to stay erased." I found myself tracing the engraved letters with my finger. I hadn't visited her grave since the ruling, not because I was angry, but because I knew she would have preferred this quiet, loudly lived legacy. I never returned to the family foundation. Not once after the court granted me full legal custody of the Bar Harbor property and its inheritance funds. I could have sold it. Or even burned it to the ground just to start over. But I chose a different path. I restored it, and turned it into a retreat for writers from foster backgrounds. The first 2 residents moved in last month. I donated part of the trust in Grandma Elisa's name. No press release. No ribbon cutting. Just a quiet wire transfer and a handwritten note to the director. Make sure this goes to those left out of the pictures. My parents never reached out. Not once. Astria and Everett remained silent, buried in layers of tax audits and board reconstructions. I read in a local newsletter that the foundation had temporarily suspended operations. That was the most I heard. Callista, however, surprised me. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. No return address, just my name, written in her familiar sharp slant. Inside was a single page. No flowery apology. Just 10 words. You were right. I'm sorry it took this to see it. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I placed the letter in a small safe, alongside the old graduation pin I once believed would make me feel like I belonged to something. Neither held the weight they once did. But I kept them anyway, not as reminders of what I had lost, but of what I had learned. I no longer longed for their table. I had my own. And these days, I chose who sat with me. A small boy with a gap-toothed smile interrupted my thoughts. He held a little paper craft in his hands, a ribbon folded and glued with crooked lines and love. "This is for you," he said, "because you showed up." I knelt to his level. "You made this?" He nodded. "It's a badge. Like the ones adults wear when they're important." I smiled, tears threatening to fall, but I held them back. "Well, thank you. I think this might be the best one I've ever had." I pinned it to my lapel, right over the spot where the old Caldwell crest once sat. The one I wore the day they disowned me. This one was better. Softer. Earned. The kids resumed their poetry readings, and I sat in the last row, not to be seen, not to prove anything, just to be there. To listen. To belong, on my own terms. Forgiveness, I had learned, isn't about pretending none of it hurt. It isn't even about freeing other people. It's about freeing yourself from the endless, exhausting hope that someday they'll finally understand. Some wounds aren't stitched with words. Some just stop bleeding when you stop picking them open. And for the first time in a very, very long time, the silence around me didn't hurt. It held me. It made space. And I chose it. Sometimes, the deepest wounds come from the people who were supposed to protect you. But healing doesn't mean returning. It means moving forward, on your own terms. Have you ever faced a moment like this, where walking away was the most powerful thing you could do? Share your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more real, powerful family drama, don't forget to subscribe. More stories like this are coming soon.